pilot, former member of the Navy, polyglot, engineer, runner, and Japan-bound, Sean seems to do it all. One of my oldest friends, I've known Sean since I was 5. We even played on the same baseball team as kids. Never afraid to try something new and do something fun and exciting, whether it's going out with friends or going to a flight. He's another one of my friends whom I admire for having a good work-life balance. I've had some of the most fun and memorable experiences with Sean over the years, road trips to my cottage, doing spins in his plane, or dancing at an after-hours club late into the following day. Once the COVID situation dies down, he'll be headed to Japan to complete a second master's degree in engineering, where I hope to visit and create more memorable experiences with him there. So please welcome Sean to today's podcast.
Hey Toby, how's it going, man? Yeah, a lot of good memories. I feel like I've known you forever.
Thanks for coming. So as I mentioned, you're constantly challenging yourself by doing all these things. How did those come about? Like flying, for example, did you wake up one day and just say, you know what, I want to learn how to fly? How did that come about?
Yeah, flying was an interesting one for me, I gotta say. I kind of always wanted to. I mean, every kid wants to, learn how to fly or be in the air and stuff. I was like, okay, I used to work at Dollarama, and I worked for the purpose of saving money for my pilot license because those things aren't that cheap, like a private license here in Canada will cost you $13,000 easy. So I was like, okay, I'm going to save some money. And I did that for like 3 years working at Dollarama. Finally, I had enough money. I had about like $9,000 saved, and I'd probably make the rest along the way, I assume. And I just went to flying school, and I said, yeah, can I sign up? But let me tell you, that signature, that first signature is scary because you're just it's a big commitment, an expensive commitment. But I was happy because I just remember I was looking at it, I'm like, do I really want to do this, And I didn't really know at the time, but I was like, okay, I'm just going to sign it. And then I signed it, and that kind of forced me to finish through, And then obviously flying is really fun. I mean, you've been in my plane, right? It's a good time. So I just continued, and I did my private license. I went on to do my night rating, my multi-engine rating, my commercial. I'm just keep doing it, just keep learning. And right now I'm just at a point where I do it recreationally for fun, but no regrets, honestly. Good time.
You kind of mentioned that point of when you're signing the paper, you're am I going to do this? Or were there ever any of these kind of barriers that came up, or were you ever fearful about what you were getting into? Most people would kind of say, okay, I'm actually don't want to learn to fly because I'm scared of what could happen. Or people have this idea of kind of fear that can kind of overcome maybe some things they want to do. Were there any things like that? I mean, I guess you kind of built it up in a sense by saving up money for it. So you kind of had made yourself invested literally into it. But what were other moments, or was it really that signing where you had certain thoughts okay, am I really doing this?
Yeah, I'd say definitely the signing was one of the most memorable things. Probably changed my life from that point on because I was like, just do it. You know what I mean? Just sign up for it, or whatever you want to do, just try it out. And if it turns out you don't like it, or if it's something that you don't want to do anymore, you could just stop, but you just got to take that first step. And it's something honestly, that particular moment, really weird looking back, but I think it influenced me a lot because that's what I do with a lot of my things now. I think going to study in Japan, for example, as you mentioned, it's a big step. I've never lived abroad before, but you just got to do it. And worst comes to worst, you just stop, if you're not enjoying it. And so coming back to your question about fears and stuff, I think it's just that initial moment when you're just what am I about to get myself into? Where am I going to be down the road from this moment? It's that initial fear there. I think you just got to realize that no matter what happens, it's not a permanent thing, you can always go back on it. And that's how I kind of approach it.
I mean, have there ever been any of those moments when you're okay, I'm going to stop, or I got to go back? How do you know when that kind of fear is actually the right thing to listen to? I'm going to stop, or is it more if you're enjoying it, or what keeps you going with something? One
recent thing that I'm contemplating stopping is volleyball, for example. And it's something that I've played for a long time since I was a kid. And with the pilot license, I kept building it up, and I played with the club, played with the university, playing so much. I've experienced a lot of injuries and stuff, and I want to continue, but it's that fear of getting injured and not being able to progress anymore and like not being able to play sport or be active and stuff like that. That fear is, I've been contemplating it. And like you said, it might be in this case one of those times where like it could be actually better to step down and not continue. So honestly, like if I've experienced it before that time to step back, I don't know. I'm not really sure, but I think I'm experiencing it right now actually.
Even in terms of the flying though too, because once you do make that signature and you're starting getting actually in the plane and flying, like were there ever again any of those moments like, I'm actually fearful of like what, or like you've had a flight that kind of shook you and you were like, what am I doing? But I mean, you've obviously continued, but how does that come about, or does that ever happen?
Yeah. I had one dangerous flight, and I'd say it definitely makes you think twice. Like, is this all worth it? Or like, what's the point? Like, I don't want to risk my life. Flight, it was with my roommate back in Kingston. You might know him. We ran out of fuel in one engine. It was a double prop. Luckily, we were pretty close to Kingston and we were able to land. But makes you think like, why am I doing this? If it's just for fun, like one, it's very expensive, and two, it's definitely a dangerous hobby.
I guess in that moment though too, you've kind of overcome it and you've like it's almost made you a better pilot because you're able to deal with the situation and like you prove to yourself that you can deal with these situations, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's like definitely a positive out of that experience because I mean, when you're training for your license, you're private, be it your private, your commercial, like you go over all these drills. So like what happens if one engine fails, or what happens if you have an engine fire or fire in the cabin? Like you learn by heart all these procedures, but you never have had to apply it. And so that was one case where I was like, the theory that I learned like came into practice, and like I'm overall more confident, much more confident flying after that incident.
So I'd like to talk a bit about like your schooling and that role it plays in your life. I know you've completed like already a bachelor's of engineering, a master's of engineering more recently, and you're about to start on another master's. So what was like the decision making process like when you decided to continue going with school and to do like a master's and then even a second master's? Like what is important about school to you, and kind of what role does it have in your life?
Well, the first master's for me was kind of like a no-brainer, I would say, because I always wanted to do a master's, and I developed a passion like in CGEP and in university for robotics, so it felt only natural to continue. And like one of the main motivators, obviously, for doing a master's was like learning more about the subject that you like a lot, and for me that was robotics. The past couple of years at the Royal Military College, I got to play with drones and stuff and work around with that, and I definitely learned a lot from that. The reason for the second master's, I don't know. I see myself as the kind of person that like once I join, like find a job or something, I'm going to be committed to that job for a while. I'm not really ready for that, I don't think. And so I decided it'd be good to do more education and, be it master's or PhD. Some might say, if you've done a master's, it's time to do a PhD. The reason I didn't do that was because I didn't want to spend too much time in Japan in case I didn't like it. A PhD can amount to a lot of time. And so that was one of the factors I was considering. Like, if it's just 2 years, I'm sure I could do it no matter what. I've already done a master's, so I know kind of what it entails. But a PhD is something new and in a completely different country. It was one of those, maybe one of those fearful moments that we were talking about before that I was considering. And I was like, maybe it's better to hold back in this case as well and just do another master's, something that I know, something that I can do. So that was my motivation for the second master's. And the reason for going abroad, honestly, was adventure part of it. And I took Japanese in undergrad. I wanted to continue that, not lose that. I see myself as like kind of a person that like I don't learn a variety of different things. The stuff I learn, like I want to make sure it's not a waste of time, And a lot of times, like if you learn a language, it's so easy to, if you don't practice it, to just forget about it, And that would be like a huge waste in my eyes, a couple, 3-4 years of learning Japanese and then you never use it again. Like what a waste of time. So I figured if I go to Japan and I'd have very good opportunity to master the language in that sense. And that was one of the major reasons I decided to go too.
Building on that too, talking about Japan and then leaving and all these things. We were both raised in the same neighborhood of Montreal, went to the same elementary school, played on the same baseball team, same high school, and even same university for our bachelor's. So, how has your neighborhood or your home made you who you are, or affected the decisions you've made? Like, have you, even with the Japan thing, like how did you decide? And again, before that with the masters, like how did you decide it was time for you to leave? Was it more like you felt kind of trapped or constricted in where you were, or was it just more of like a curiosity and like you talked about this adventure thing too? Yeah, how is it where you're from kind of affected your decisions, and like what ultimately, has made you kind of move elsewhere?
Yeah, well, I'd say we grew up in a pretty good neighborhood, no? Like overall, like NDG, especially the suburb where we're from, is very good schools. Royal Vale, where we went, can't complain about that. Royal West, another great school. And honestly, I think those schools, they really shaped who we were in a sense. They put in our head that education is a pretty important tool and one that can be developed. And I think because of that, we went to like good CJEPs, we went to good universities. We both completed a master's, like I think that all stems from the fact that like from a very young age we were in a good learning environment, made us motivated. That's like maybe subconsciously one of the traits that define us, like why we aspired to learn so much. But I think the reason I went in Kingston to study there, and Tokyo to study. I'm going to go to Tokyo to study there. Definitely are influenced by like my time here, and I think it's built in a confidence in me that like, yeah, I know what this is about, and I think I can do it, and it's not a huge deal to go live somewhere else and do your studies. Yeah, I definitely think where we come had an influence, and like the type of people around, like we all know our friends, they're all very motivated people. We have some guys who are computer programmers, some guys who are doing PhDs in the States. Like it's a highly motivated group of people, and I think that all stemmed from the fact that we all came from similar backgrounds, and we all motivate each other in that sense, I guess.
Like, what is your relationship to it now, though? Like, having grown up, and like, do you ever feel like you've outlived it, or like, will you always kind of come back to it, or like, I don't know, how do you see your home and your neighborhood?
It's a good question, man. Honestly, I think no matter what, I'd like to come back and contribute in the way that people contributed for me to learn. You know what I mean? Like, for example, a couple years back, I went back to Royal West to help judge a science fair. Also, I went back and I was their volleyball coach for a couple of years. All those experiences that really helped form who I was. I really want to make sure, I would really want to make sure that, people have the same experience, because I think it really helped who we were. All those extracurriculars at Royal West like gave us a chance to see what we like and see what we don't like. Yeah, I'd definitely like to come back, and I think like I'd like to give one day, if I ever amount to anything crazy, I'd like to come back and give a speech at Royal West, like give some advice, give some I remember those days, like you're worried about like your CJEP applications and all that stuff, and like it'd be cool to go back and like reassure all those kids.
I think that's kind of a unique perspective to take. Like, I think of what I've myself, like I haven't even returned to Royal West since I've graduated, and next year will be, 10 years since we graduated. So I don't think people have that same like want to like give back, because I guess, yeah, but we thinking back, like, yeah, you do have these moments where like people can either motivate you or give you some sort of boost, and wanting to give that back, I think, is pretty unique.
Yeah, Mr. Zigbee. Did you ever have Mr. Zigbee?
I did. I had him.
Yeah, I always felt like he was a great influence on me. Like he always was enthusiastic about teaching, and he was always wanted to help the students, I found. And he's a teacher. Looking back in my head, like that's the same impact I would like to have if I ever, end up helping back in my neighborhood and stuff. Like that guy, I think he influenced me, and he like taught me that it's like okay to aspire to be something and to go for it and have fun at the same time. Like, honestly, shout out to Mr. Zigbee.
I talked a lot about having these memorable experiences we've had together, and the fact kind of you're always, I think part of why we've had this is like you're always keen to try and do new things, and you always approach it with enthusiasm. Is this something that you've always kind of had, or did you work on kind of bringing enthusiasm and positivity like into your life, and what kind of drove you to do that?
I would say I'm decently positive. Yeah, but like I think the main thing for me is like the things I do are like things that I like, like be it flying or studying robotics or being in the Navy, skydiving, scuba diving, like all that things are very interesting things to me. And so yeah, I have a positive attitude because I like those things, but ask me to do something I don't like, you know what I mean? But I think also a big influence for me in doing all these things is maybe not getting overwhelmed by them. You have all these things you got to do them at your own pace. Don't let it always be like enjoyable. And like, even if you do a bit here and there, you'll keep progressing. As long as you're consistent, I think that's a big thing for me. As long as I'm consistent, I'm happy. Like as long as I manage to fly, once a month, for a couple hours now, I think that's good. I'm staying current and it's not too much time for me. Practicing language, you practice a couple hours a week, you maintain your skills. I think that's what keeps me motivated, keeps me positive. Like I would hate to, like I said previously, like go backwards, as long as I'm staying at the current level I'm at or surpassing that level, I'm definitely going to be positive in like everything I do. I think that's definitely one of the keys, just trying to be consistent with everything.
Even in like your personal life, I find you've brought that kind of same like fervor or like enthusiasm to just doing anything. And was that something you like, did you do, like, or have you always just kind of had that? Like,
I think the big key in being like enthusiastic is just not being stressed. I know for me, if I'm stressed, or I'm overwhelmed, that's when I probably am not as enthusiastic, I'd say. I think just limiting your expectations, so that you don't get overwhelmed, is definitely important. It's not something I never realized. I guess I don't see myself as overly enthusiastic, but maybe that's the case to others.
was there ever a moment or something that someone said to you or proposed and like you said no to it? Like,
yeah, for sure. Like, there's some stuff I'll never do, but I think it's more like in the sense of dangerous things. Obviously, I'm not going to participate, but I think if it's something I feel comfortable with, then yeah, I'm going to be enthusiastic about it for sure.
how do you approach even something like being comfortable? Because many would argue that, or I would assume, like for myself, even that doing something like scuba diving or flying a plane, like these are not necessarily situations where I would have any sort of comfort, but there's still a kind of a want or a need to like overcome that. So how do you kind of gauge whether or not there is, this discomfort is worth surpassing because I'll get something out of it, or versus, really, this is not really the right thing to do because I'm just too uncomfortable with it.
I think for me, maybe in terms of scuba diving, I definitely had one of those moments because I used to have ear problems. My right ear, when I started scuba diving, I couldn't equalize that well. And I think it's because I had a lot of surgeries when I was a kid. And I went to see a dive doctor about it. He told me like, yeah, you should stop diving and stuff. Because, like every time I dove, my ear would be in a lot of pain. I think that was one of the times where I was like, once again, like, is this really worth it? And so I stopped diving for a long time because, like you said, like that discomfort was insurmountable in a sense. But then, I don't know, like I got an itch for it again. I decided, like maybe there's something I could do so that my ears can equalize. Because what happened was there was a lot of residual scarring. So it was hard for them to equalize because they were very stiff. A scar can be very stiff. What I did was like I took it slow. Like I said before, like I was just consistent and like I went very slowly, So I started in the pool and I'd go like once or twice a week and like practice equalizing and like nothing would happen. And I just kept doing that for like a period of 2 or 3 months. And then finally my right ear, which was the bad one, would like pop a bit, and then I kept going. Like that motivated me a lot. this discomfort in the ear, eventually like I was able to surpass it, like over a period of, half a year of me going to pools. And finally, like I went from the pool to the water again. And I'd say that was one of those moments. I was in my scuba gear. It had been like a good 6 years since I went into open water again. And I could feel the heart beating out of my chest, and I'm pretty sure like the other people who were with me, they could see it too. I was sweating. I just decided, like, I think it was one of those moments similar to the pilot experience where you got to sign on the line. And I was like, okay, well, you're going to do it, and you're just going to feel it out at first, be cautious, you know your limits, and then progress slowly. So that's what I did. Like I started off very slowly that day and then became more and more comfortable, and I was able to equalize as I went down and down and down. I finally overcame that difficulty. I think, I think that's how you got to approach it, like slowly but surely, and like know your limitations and always try to exceed them, if you feel it's worth it. For me, in the case of diving, I think it's a passion of mine now, and I definitely want to continue it, but it wouldn't have been possible without those like baby steps, and like understanding my own limitations, obviously.
The fact that you are very active and constantly pushing your body to be stronger, fitter, healthier. You do things like volleyball. You've been in the Navy, done basic training. I know you're kind of a runner. So what role do you think athletics and fitness play in your life? For example, like, do they help you in other parts of your life?
Yeah, I think athletics played a huge role in my life, to be honest. Maybe one of the biggest. One, it's very important to be active in all these things, like be it the Navy, be it scuba diving or skydiving. Like those things you need to be active for that, and you need to be in good shape relatively. But I think even more important is character. Like character you build from being on like a competitive sports team or doing competitive sports, I think is very beneficial to like completing other things, because in sports you go through like a lot of hardships in a very small amount of time. I'd say one of the most character forming moments for me was when I started playing volleyball at this club in NDG, where they had this crazy Estonian coach, and he'd run you into the ground. And I was just a grade eighter, not in that amazing shape, still a bit chubby. People would come into that club and never come back. They'd come for one practice and never come back. I saw it so many times, and for some reason I stuck there, and 3 times a week for like 3 hours I would go and do these crazy workouts. Like the warm up, honestly, was like one of the craziest warm ups in your life. Like you'd start the warm up running like 3K, then you'd do like a bunch of push ups, sit ups, you'd climb ropes. Like the whole warm up took me like 45 minutes, and that got me into shape, and like it taught me the merit of hard work. Like I could feel my body changing, becoming more comfortable. It taught me like, if you put the work in, you'll get results. Like it was obvious, and I think that's one thing that motivated me, like in all the other things I do. It's like, I know once again, if I put the work in, results will come, and it may be slow, it may be quick, but like in the case of athletics, like it's so tangible, you know what I mean? Like you can really see it. You can see yourself getting better at the sport. It really helps you gauge like what you're capable of, and like puts you through a lot of hardships, you know what I mean? Like you go through a lot of hardships, like can I do this, why can't I do this? And like it just helps you become like a more grounded person in the face of adversity. Especially when I went to higher level sports, like when I played for the university team in Kingston, that was like a very mentally tough challenge, because you're playing against like some of the best players in the country, or in Ontario at least. It's a whole nother level. You have spectators, your stats are taken into account. Like it's a very high level, and like it can be stressful at times, and you have to learn how to manage that stress, especially in times where like you're not playing well. You got to figure out like what kind of mind state makes you perform, and so that's another thing that sports definitely taught me, is like, what mindset am I best in? You know what I mean? Like, for example, that scuba diving time, like when it was my first time after 6 years and my heart was jumping out of my chest, it's like, what mindset will help you overcome this? You know what I mean? Like, and I think back to sports is like, yeah, you're nervous, but like, just think of what you have to do. You know what I mean? Like, don't focus on your nerves, just think about your next action. And I think that's something that sports taught me very well. It's like, don't think about your previous mistakes, just focus on what you have to do next and like visualize it. And so yeah, sports, honestly, huge impact on my life. It taught me like what hard work can bring, and it taught me like what kind of mentality to bring.
It kind of leads to this idea too of like when you're doing a sport too, you're balancing all these things, and I wanted to know, how do you balance all these things, or balance like school and you specifically like with your personal life? Have you ever had a situation where you've had to like put one over the other, or are they kind of hand in hand? Like especially with sports too, you're kind of like there's a social aspect too of it, I think maybe.
That is definitely a sacrifice you have to make, because you're doing all these things and they take up a lot of time, and especially things like studying and stuff. So I think a lot of your friends evolve into being people that share common interests with you, you know, just in terms of like making new friends and stuff. It usually comes from like some guy I met at the airport, or some guy I went diving with, you know, or definitely my volleyball friends, you know, like, or my Navy friends, you know, they all fall into these groups of friends with things that have an interest. And in that sense, it makes it easier to balance the two, I'd say. Sometimes, yeah, it's definitely tough to know which one to prioritize, you know, the social aspect or furthering one of your passions.
Well, what you're saying is kind of touching on my another question I had though, in terms of like friends and family, because you're moving to Japan, so there will be kind of this, there is this unknown and not really knowing anyone or having friends, so you will have to kind of make some friends. And I know that when I went on exchange, that was one of the big things kind of I struggled with, was trying to like make these friends. And it was only really after the fact that I joined this like film society when I started to get some closer friends. So how do you approach kind of making friends and help making you feel like you belong somewhere? And I guess you said having these interests helps too. Is that a big part of it, you think?
That's one of the fears I have going to Japan for sure, you know, like a language that I'm not 100% comfortable with, or not even, you know, 50% comfortable with. But I just think back to my experience in Kingston, where I didn't know anyone, you know, and one of the things I did purposefully was like move into a house with a lot of people. So like I had 4 roommates, you know, and like if you live with people, you're probably going to end up loving them or hating them, you know. But like, thankfully for me, like it was mostly love for the most part, you know. So I made some good friends there. I think I accept the fact that when I go there, like at first it's probably going to be pretty lonely. Like I think that's already ingrained in my head. Like it's going to be lonely at first because you're not going to know anyone. And I'm just going to keep that in the back of my head whenever I feel like demotivated, you know. I'm like, it's only the beginning. Like I'll think back to Kingston, you know, where like I didn't know anyone, but I finished by having a good circle, you know.
And my final question is just on a shorter time scale, and something I've been dealing with a lot, especially now with kind of quarantining and the whole coronavirus, you know, being meant to stay home, and also me having no kind of job or formal obligations. So I find it especially difficult in these circumstances sometimes getting up in the morning. So I'm wondering for you, like what gets you up in the morning, or are there ever any moments that you struggle, or how do you overcome this?
In terms of right now, I agree with you. It can be tough. In my particular case, I was supposed to be in Japan in April, you know, so it could be a bit demotivating because of coronavirus. I'm still here. In my head, I know eventually once the virus, you know, dies down and borders reopen, I'll be going to Japan. So that keeps me motivated. But is that true or not? You know, like who knows how long this virus will last? It's maybe a false reality that I'm holding on to, but it helps me stay motivated. And it helps me because right now I got to study for an entrance exam that I'm going to be taking in August. And so to study for that, you know, like sometimes I'm like, am I ever really going to take this exam? You know, like with the virus, like who knows? You know, am I studying for nothing? I just hold on to the fact that like, yeah, things will get better. The borders will eventually open up, you know, be it now, like being in a couple months, be it in a year, being in 2-3 years, you know, fingers crossed, not like 20 years, but hey, you never know. But yeah, so like I just hold on to that fact and And that's what keeps me motivated in these times, I think. And also something else that helps me keep motivated is like, I don't know, it might sound weird, but like being organized in the sense that like go to bed knowing, some of the things that you want to accomplish the next day, And then I know for myself, like I make a list like, okay, for example, I want to do 3 hours of studying, 20 minutes of Spanish. And then like I go on my list and I tick it off. Once I'm done it. There's a bit of satisfaction in doing that, but that helps you, like, even if you're not motivated, maybe you can find the motivation to just do that one thing in that day, and then you do it for the next day. You do it for the next day, and then you'll find out that in a week, you've done like 2 hours of Spanish. And I think it comes back to one of those things of just like being consistent. And I think coupled with like being organized, it can help you keep motivated. You don't have to be like, yeah, I'm going to do it. You just got to do these 20 minutes or you just got to do this one workout, and then little by little, you just keep doing it. And like I said, I'm okay with me not progressing per se, but like as long as I maintain what I have, I don't want to lose it. As long as I do that, I'm happy, and that keeps me motivated, just doing that minimum. I think everyone's capable of doing like the bare minimum. For me, it's like crossing off these things in that list. That's my main motivator right now, at least.
And building off of that, like, what are your thoughts in general on like productivity? Like for you, what is productive day, or does it even matter about productivity, or can you take time to relax? Like, I guess the list thing, maybe for you, like if you completed all the things on the list in a day, that's a productive day, or what? How do you view productivity?
In terms of the list, like if I complete all the stuff in the day, I'm not going to go and do, an extra 2 hours of studying or something like that. I'm going to be like, yeah, you did what you wanted to do, like go enjoy the rest of the day, go and do something that, can take your mind off this if you need it, like do whatever you want. But like, just make sure you do what you got to do every day. If you say like, for example, I want to, get my private license, my pilot license, and you break it up into like, what do I got to do each month? So I got to fly like 10 hours each month. What do I got to do each week? I got to fly like 2 hours each week, 3 hours each week. And then it becomes like a smaller portion in your mind, of things to do. Like, okay, I only have to fly 3 hours in a week, that's nothing. So it's very easy. And then if you consistently do that, before you know it, you'll have your private pilot license. So sometimes, yeah, I think it could be overwhelming, consider the big picture, like the end goal. For me, what helps me stay like grounded is maybe like just focusing on like the day-to-day stuff. If I've done it, if I accomplish what I need to do in the day or in the week, then like don't try and do too much more, like I think there's also like a balance. You don't want to do too much that you get sick of it, I think that happens to me sometimes too. If I haven't gone to the gym for a while and then I go every day, after 1 week I'm like, oh, do I even want to go again, So I think you just got to figure out what you can handle. Eventually, I think you'll find out that you can start handling more. I think that's what's happened with me. Like things that I've been doing a long time, maybe you start getting good at it so you can take on a little more. And you'll know when it's time. That's how I've perceived it so far. You never want to overexert yourself, I think, to the point where like you're sick of doing something. Otherwise, one, you've wasted all that time doing that particular thing. Two, like if you stop, it's only gonna regress back to zero. Don't do too much, in too little time.
Yeah, and maybe that I've touched on this too with other people I've talked to about some of the kind of societal pressures or pressures from outside in terms of how we see something even like productivity. And there's this idea that, if you're constantly like doing more and more and more, and that's like inherently like a good thing, like how many things you've done in like even a day or whatever it is. But I think you're giving a nice kind of balance of, yes, doing stuff and doing what you want to do, but also not getting too stuck in it or too focused in it that you don't see these other things or take advantage of your day in other ways. Like you said, if you finish these things in the morning that you wanted to do, you can afford to maybe give yourself some time to go do something else. And is that how you see it too, or was it not?
100%. I agree with you 100%. Like you gotta just balance yourself. You don't want to end up being someone who's like solely focused on being productive, and especially in something that you don't even like. Hopefully you're spending a lot of time in something that you like, and in that case, I don't think it's that bad, because you're doing what you like. So you're balanced. I know for me, and I feel like the majority of people, like doing one thing, even if they like it for like days on end, nonstop, can become a burden as well. And so like, I think it's very important. I'm lucky in the sense that like I have a lot of different hobbies that I can like always fall back onto if like one of them is being cumbersome on me. If I feel like, oh, I've been flying so much, like I'm sick of this, then maybe I can like go watch a Russian TV show or something, I think that's the balance, the way I approach things. Like you never want to overexert yourself, because then in my personal experience, you just get sick of it and you don't want to look at it. And then it just like stays there, stays in the back burner. Something that could have been never happened.
Moving forward, I know you talked about things with Japan happening on the horizon or not, but how do you approach the future these days? It seems like you have a lot of things you're doing, but you also kind of have more stuff down the line, like even the Japan thing, you're not exactly sure, but it's kind of this thing that you talked about even motivating you, however real that reality is. But what are your views on the future? What's next for you?
Yeah, I'm just gonna keep plugging along for this exam. I'm sending in some documents to Japan soon that'll like confirm that everything, that I'm good to go for the exam. In the short future, that's what I'm working towards. In the long term, honestly, I'm finding it hard to like know what I want to do in this particular environment. If things were normal, I know I'd like to go to Japan, do my master's, and either come back, do a PhD, or study somewhere else. I think that's in the cards for me. I'm not ready to give up the studying just yet and find a job. So, I mean, we'll take it from there. But yeah, fingers crossed,
Where can people find you? Where can people, what's something people should check out, or if they want to reach you or look at something you've been involved in?
Check out my Instagram, Sean_Wolfe. You can see some of the things that I do. Like I have pictures of me skydiving, flying, just playing volleyball, like all my different hobbies. You can see that, yeah, they're enjoyable things. You don't have to stress out about it too much, about life.
So thanks for coming on, Sean. That was really interesting, pretty remarkable things, I think. So thank you.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. It was great talking to you, man. Catching up.